Hi, everyone. Welcome to another week of Stage Door Medium. And we have the very special guest today, Jason Forbach. Hi, Jason.
Hello, hi.
How are you
Thanks
doing?
for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming. I'm
Yeah.
so excited to talk with you. If you're watching at home, Jason's career is um, I will. You have to hear him sing. I will put up some clips of that you guys just have to check out. So Jason made his Broadway debut in Les Mis, the revival, in what was that 2014?
Correct. Yep.
2014. Before that, Jason was on the road with Les Mis, the same iteration of it that eventually went to Broadway. And then he's been
hmm
with the Phantom of the Opera family for quite some time. So having been in the Las Vegas Spectacular, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and then
hmm
coming over to Broadway, Secret Garden, incredible writer, which your work is already getting awards. So we got lots to talk about. This is a good one. So
Lots to dish on. Yeah.
did you know you were gonna be an artist, be an actor?
I think it was pretty clear early on because I was always, I think a lot of kids are like this. They're creating stories, they're making up characters, they're imagining worlds and friends. And I was the first in my family, and it was 5 years till my sister came around, and I was kind of like happy and existing in my own little world. And I think that's where it kind of started. And I remember early on, I don't know what I was watching, and it was because I was really into movies and all that stuff when I was a kid, and I remember thinking like, I'm gonna do that, or like relating to it in a way that I was like, oh, that's what I do. But I had no frame of reference for that as a kid growing up in the Midwest. So I just kind of denied it as a reality as I got older. And then so much of me now as an adult is chipping that away and just being like, be whoever you want to be. But I feel like I identified with that spiritual connection like almost immediately. Yeah, for sure.
And then was there a show? I mean, for example, mine probably was Phantom because growing up from where I am, it's probably about a 7-8 hour drive to New York, but Toronto's just an hour over the border. And
Oh yeah,
Phantom, that sit down production ran for like what, 10 years, 12 years or
forever.
something. So that
Long
was
time.
probably the show that stood out to me as I think getting the bug, so to speak, as a kid. Like, is there one
Oh
that,
yeah.
that sticks out for you?
Oh yeah, for our generation, I think that was a big one because I feel like every household had like the cassette or the CD. Every
The
house had
two
it.
cassette, yeah.
Yes, and we played it in the car and we sang along, and I think that was a really informative one because it also seemed magical. Like because I hadn't seen it since I was a kid on tour when it came through Kansas City, and it had been many years until Vegas Phantom happened for me, and I had just kind of like not forgotten about it, but just never saw it, just kind of let it go. And then when I went to the Majestic to watch the show again before I flew out to Vegas, and we were talking earlier about the candles and like coming up out of the fog, I was like, and you hear that like that ethereal keyboard patch, I was like, oh, I remember. And you see it as theater magic, which it's kind of sad that that doesn't happen so much anymore, budget wise and time wise. There isn't time to kind of develop that stuff, but it is wild to think that that kind of 80s technology is still kind of magical to watch.
Mm.
But I remember my childhood brain. It's like when you go to your elementary school and you walk back in as an adult and
Yeah,
you see like the tiny chairs, but you're like, oh, it's so familiar, I just remembered it kind of differently
yeah.
you know
I,
so yeah, Phantom was that for me.
I saw the tour too, and I remember as a kid. So first off, I saw it in Toronto, and I distinctly remember being really spooked out as a kid. Like it weirded me out in spots, and
Yeah.
I remember the first thing I remembered was the pyrotechnics. That always stuck with me because a friend of
hmm
mine, they sold the binoculars in the theater, so she put on the binoculars during the Red Death scene, not knowing that
uh-huh.
the flash pots go off, and
Oh yeah.
she could not see for probably about a good 20 minutes for that, and she was screaming and crying. And I remember when I was a kid seeing the national tour like super close, and I remember I was struggling in math, and my mom threatened, like, what a mom move, she threatened my tickets if my grades didn't go up. And My
Uh-huh.
average went from like a 67 to like a 94 or something like that.
Like,
So
we are going.
Phantom was that motivator. So,
Uh-huh.
wait, how long have you been with the show?
Well, I joined, Phantom was my first like big production contract. I'd done a couple of little shows and festivals and then an off-Broadway play in New York at the beginning. And then it was 2000 and it was the spring of 2007 when I went to Vegas, and I was there with them almost 3 years till 2010, and
Okay.
then joined the tour of Les Mis shortly thereafter. So from 2010 till, what is it, like 2.5 years ago now, I had not been, there was kind of like a 7+ year gap between versions.
Can I ask, I mean, even with the Vegas production then, because one of the things that I'd love to talk about is longevity. And
Mm,
I guess with a show that here's the thing that I would love to talk about parallel wise. I feel like the expectations are for Phantom are so high, and
mm,
because it's already so well established. And I feel like the same goes for when you're getting ready to go see a medium. I can already tell when somebody comes in with like, you can sense it energy wise, like the expectations are high, like they're hoping that
mm,
X, Y, and Z are the people that are going to come through, and like you better bring them. So for me, I think there's a little bit of a pressure sometimes to to bring those people through with a long running show like Phantom. Do you feel like there are pressures, to uphold and being part of the show? And how do
yeah.
you keep it fresh when you're doing that same show every night?
Yeah, that's the trickiest thing, and that's something that I, even now, it's, I think we all balance. You have to balance for your own sanity the idea of, with all arts or all anything that we do, that it matters so much and it doesn't matter at all in equal measure. Otherwise, like, you want to devote everything you can, but you can't make yourself crazy over the minutia. Audiences are enjoying it, and if you cracked a note or if you dropped a line, like, the world does not end, and you can't kind of like send yourself down this torture spiral. um that being said, that's still, I'm still working on that for myself daily, constantly. So but it is harder. There is a greater sense of higher expectation because people are all online. There are bloggers and people on like these
YouTube.
backstage, yeah, YouTube. And so, like, there is this pressure, if you get too caught in your head about it, like everything is recorded, everything does matter, or like the stakes are pretty high. I've definitely felt like that on the road, and it was a hard thing to reconcile in my mind, and just feeling mentally healthy, is that, like, you're reviewed every week. You have press there every week, kind of just like, okay, let's see, and then you read about it in the newspaper. So that's a hard thing to kind of process, but and it's always that hard thing with artists, and probably in your profession, separating your work from who you are, because it is inside of you. It is something that you can't just let go of, you
Yeah.
know but it is also your profession. And so there's a whole other science to thinking about it objectively in that way, so that you can separate, but it's not easy. I think doing long running shows helps in that regard. It starts to feel more like a job, like a nine to
Mhm.
five.
Like an office job. Yeah.
hmm And not in a negative way. It's just it's comforting and secure, and you build such a rapport with people. But it is a challenge. I think all creative minds, especially in shows, like, you learn the show, you do the show, you open it, you run a couple months, you've kind of mastered all the like little nuances. You've got as efficient as you can with changes and props and stuff. And I always find that somewhere around 3 months, that 3 month mark, artists get a little antsy, you
Mhm.
know? And if they can't negotiate with their like artistic mind that wants to just keep learning and keep creating it, if you can't figure out how to focus that energy onto another project and use another side of your brain to just do the work, then you really struggle. A lot of people struggle with doing long running shows, and it's not for everyone. Not everyone can kind of manage those emotions. And I realized that after 3 months, it's like, oh, just work on your own projects, work on your own stuff, fuel that creative need, and come up and have fun at work, and maybe it changes every night in micro ways. And sometimes that helps keep it fresh for you, but like sometimes it's not fresh, like you're trying, but I think that's where the muscle memory and the training comes in, is that you've elevated your performance to that 100% level that audiences expect, but you've managed how much energy to give to have it be your life. And I kind of like being in long running shows. It is very rare nowadays. And a lot of people bop from like big show to big show, and they kind of skip all around, and they create these huge careers. And I always felt like I was kind of like one of those workhorse actors.
Yeah.
That that I'm like, well, I've done like this show for 6 and this show for 3.5, but I'm okay with that. That's okay. I'm totally okay with that being the path that I've been on, because it's allowed me to just be an actor for like almost 15 years now. So I'm like, oh, thank God for
You
that.
said it best, though. You have it then gives you these outlets where, and from what I understand, Phantom's really wonderful about if people want to, duck out for like a month or two to go pursue a different project. And, so I feel like, if I'm not mistaken and misspeak, you're able to then come back probably with like a renewed sense of energy. And like you said, you have your own creative projects on the side that I think help to balance.
Yeah, I think you have to. Phantom's really good about it because it's been around forever. So they otherwise I'm a vacation swing there now. And I swing about 8 different tracks, or did swing about 8 different tracks. So, if they weren't gracious with how they allowed people to step away and do projects, and for myself, be gracious about allowing me to do the same, then we'd all be, climbing the walls. So yeah, Phantom's fantastic about it.
You bring up such a great point too about being reviewed weekly. And I feel like as a medium, it's, if I have 5 days worth of readings for the week, it's literally a different review, so to speak, every day, because you're not telling the same story. Like, you're the same person, so to speak, bringing that story through. But it's interesting. Like, if I have an off day, like, it's not a full company, it's just me running the ship. So if I have an off day, that's one person. Let's say they had 10 people that they wanted to promote it to, and they didn't have a good experience for some odd reason, which is rare, but that's that review, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
with the show in general, is it hard to shake? Because my brain immediately goes to how heavy it is. And it's weird though, but it doesn't seem like a heavy show in spots. But when you think of it at its heart, it's super heavy. So, do you guys have a hard time shedding that?
I think it depends on the track you're doing. And to me, the heaviest and the hardest was Les Mis. The workload, the length of the show, the amount that was required of us, physically, vocally, it was the most taxing. And to do that for 6 years, it was like, it was an endurance test beyond,
Yeah.
beyond. Phantom is a little bit, as Rao, yes, there's a lot of work you have to do. You're sweating, you're running around, you're wearing period costumes. There's something about the tone of it that doesn't weigh on me the way Les Mis did. And in the ensemble, there's a lot of downtime for us there. So we kind of have a lot more fun.
Yeah.
We have a lot more fun backstage, as was the case with Secret Garden too. The ensemble, I played Albert and was in the ensemble. And so I had a lot of downtime. And so that kind of alleviated the pressure. I think if I were to be some of the other characters, or you're carrying a lot more, it's just, once the show starts, you have to put your blinders on, do the work, come out the other end. And that is really hard. That's the way it was with me as Enjorlas. And in the ensemble, it's just like, here we go. And I'll see you in 3 hours, know? But Phantom, yes, even though it is a dark kind of gothic romantic thing, it doesn't weigh on my spirit heavily the way Les Mis did. Les Mis was like, you're exhausted, you take the train home and you pour yourself like a tumbler of scotch and you just are like, let's do it again tomorrow.
Because because you're also watching what spans so many years with Les Mis. You're watching this journey. And I mean, people are dying from what, 20 minutes in, and
Oh yeah,
then it basically doesn't stop. Um,
yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, we had these authentic muskets that weighed like 20 plus pounds, and you're feeling, they really wanted to get the kick of the rifle, and then you're riddled with bullets, and even in like engaging your body in that way, like you're going through the act of dying every day, and that's exhausting. It takes a physical toll on your body.
Sarah Paulson had talked about that. She had done an interview where she was talking about American Horror Story and
Mm,
how she was going to a physical therapist, and she said that she would see a therapist during shooting, because
mhm.
she said I forgot, it was Roanoke, I think, that season. She was like, I basically just sat in a corner and ran through a house and screamed and cried the entire time. And she was like, she goes, your body is mimicking,
Yes,
symptoms of
simulating that
trauma.
response. Yeah,
And she said how it really took a toll on her. Um,
of
you know,
course.
I think the same thing goes for readings. There are some that I can shed right away.
Mm,
I would say about 60 to 70% of them, it's easy to shed, not in a disrespectful way, but many times it's,
yeah.
hey, Graham's here, and she gives the specific details, or they're excited about the wedding. But then you have some that are really heavy, and
Hmm.
and um sometimes they'll flood you with the emotion to understand the gravity of the situation. And so I think when you
Wow.
deal with murders, when you deal with suicides, you're getting these folks on the other side that miss their loved ones so much, and then you're getting people right in front of you who
Mm,
are who are upset, they're hurting. So I think too, that's hard. So I think typically
yeah.
for those, like, my spouse knows if it's a heavy one, I'll just go, like, I'm gonna go for a walk and I'll take the dog. I will walk
Hmm.
them separate usually, and just, and I know about that with your little
Yeah.
baby. You have
Oh
to.
my God. You wouldn't believe how many walks you go on where I'm like, oh, I just need to clear my head. Yep.
There's something very grounding about, like, you just dealt with something heavy, and now pick up my poop. You know what I mean? And bag it. And it's
Yeah.
it's so true though.
The
It snaps you
simplicity
out
of
of it.
it. Yeah.
Yep,
Hmm.
it snaps you
Like,
out of it. What's your take on Phantom? Like, what's the story at heart about? Because I've always seen this as an exploration of the grieving process and what
mm,
happens to, it's our vulnerability. I mean,
hmm,
I remember, gosh, hearing Ali Ewald talk about it as well. We
hmm.
use her psych background, and she was also mentioning how you have this girl that loses her dad, and she's
Yeah.
incredibly vulnerable. And because
Yeah.
I don't think audiences realize that sometimes, about, I've always kind of imagined it that she loses her dad pretty close to,
Hmm.
I mean, it's even I mean, it's even, what is it, three? She says in Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again. The updated ones are what, three long years?
I can't remember.
The
I
two
can't
are
remember.
changing. I want to say it's under five. That much I know. And so, I mean, for me, I find it so compelling because I think my brain too, as being a medium, sadly, you've heard of cases where you have had really bad mediums that have capitalized on the grief process for somebody, and that have used the most bare bones of information to run with, and take people that are vulnerable. And obviously those are far and few, but I remember hearing awful stories about
Yeah.
that. My brain just immediately thinks of this man that seizes on an opportunity of somebody that's
Yes.
missing her dad. And
Well, it's easy to forget that she's still such a young girl
yeah.
in the course of this drama. So when you think about that, and how hard it is for children to process that anyway, without any tools, and then to be thrust into that kind of situation without any tools. Yeah, it really, that is 100% accurate. And
I would love to pick your brain on the differences in energy between the Vegas audiences and the Broadway audiences, because with Phantom, I mean, obviously it's still such a tourist show. I mean, I myself, I mean, many times when I'm in town, I have such a soft spot for it, and I like to. It's a horrible metaphor. I kind of describe Phantom as like that alien relative in the nursing home, where, like, you don't know how long it will be there, so you're like,
you're like,
I want to
just go
go.
check on her.
I want to go check on them and just say hi. You know what I mean? And let them know that I love them,
Yeah,
support them. And so it's a horrible, analogy, but it's kind of true. And
yeah.
for you, were your audiences different in Vegas? Because my brain goes to like the Vegas clientele, and did that impact your performance?
It's interesting because the Vegas clientele is so different. Um, but we rarely got kind of rowdy audience member. I mean, there are a few iconic moments and stories from Vegas where we're like, what? I mean, just totally inappropriate behavior.
Sure.
Some things I don't even think are, totally appropriate to say. And that did happen. You're like, only in Vegas, where you're like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, incredible. So that happened on a handful of occasions. We didn't get it wasn't hugely trafficked. Um, as it is in New York. It's such an iconic, like, New York is like Rockettes, Statue of Liberty, Phantom. It's part of like, it's less about Broadway now and more about like a New York
It's a part of New
institution.
York. Yeah.
And so, New York audiences are like packed every night. And they will be more traditionally respectful. It's so interesting because when you're talking about engagement with the audience, I think it is different per house. Because like in the Imperial, and especially with the show was like sometimes we're coming up through the audience, it feels like the audience is like right up in your grill. And in the Majestic, they seem so far away and it's so dark that I kind of just forget that they're even
Yeah.
there. Vegas, we were a little bit more aware. I mean, Vegas is its own animal, and it does pain me that like especially now they're struggling so much. Cirque going bankrupt, all music theater has left Vegas. It's such a shame. But you know what? Like everything, I think the pendulum will swing back, and they will kind of have this need for varied arts there again. But I mean, crazy stuff went down in Vegas on occasion that would never happen in New York.
I can only imagine,
Well,
running.
the funny thing is that like what I think your listeners might get a kick out of is that we're aware of everything. Like it is so funny how there isn't a second that goes by where like you'll be on stage with someone and they're like, the lady in the third row is going, like we're communicating. They're like, who? Third row? Oh my god, what's she doing? Like everyone's aware of everything.
I would imagine
And
during the Hannibal opening too, when they're teching everything and fixing things, I would imagine if you're in the chorus part, you probably have so many moments to chat about, with your company
oh
member,
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah, you're just kind of clocking you're assessing the situation, you're checking in with people.
What are your thoughts? Are we supposed to like Raul or not? Because I feel like people hate him and he's not a bad guy.
Yeah, it's
He's just
kind of
not so
tough,
fun.
right? Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because it's like we're always playing into that aristocratic kind of pulled up, emotionally distant. It's like
Yeah.
classism. It's classism, and I think that's what people kind of don't respond to. But he's supposed to be the romantic lead. It is funny. It's like you don't. I think that's what's so interesting when they play with the sequel is that they start kind of like chipping away at his veneer and give him a few flaws. And I think that's human nature, right? People are like, there's dimension.
I know. I mean, Raul's biggest thing and what it's like, he's like, what is he like? I've got to get my hat or something like that. Like he's like, I'll be right back. We're gonna get dinner, but I got to get my hat first. And like just his priorities
Like,
are.
okay, buddy.
What's your favorite flub that you look back and you're like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing, but like now you can laugh on it while you were in Phantom or Les Mis?
Um, it's so funny because it's like flubs happen all the time, especially with very tech heavy shows. Like you just never know. And I've had like a few major injuries happen. Like I've had to been hospitalized from shows a couple of times. But so like it's kind of like anything can happen. I think my favorite flub is in Les Mis. I was playing the factory foreman, and Montego Glover was Fantine, and Fantine and the factory girl get in this fight, and they're wrestling on the ground, and Montego's wig just came completely off. And we're standing there, and like I forget who the factory girl was like holding the wig and was like, and Montego took the wig and just left. And she left the scene and she was like getting it properly pinned back. She couldn't find a hair person in the wings. So she went downstairs, like And Les Mis is a train. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. The music keeps going. The scene happens. She takes off. Valjean comes in, and the whole thing is about her, and there's no one there. And we're all like,
All this being
oh.
about, yeah.
And this one guy from the ensemble, way in the back, thought he would like musicalize her backstory.
No.
So we're kind of like silent, like, I don't know what we do. Because it's when Fantine's supposed to plead and beg, I have a child, this child's my daughter, I'm doing all this stuff. And this guy who still cracks me up to this day is like, oh yeah, she has a child. The child's a daughter. Like from the back, like a guy in the factory knows everything about Fantine and starts chiming in. We're like, good improv skills, buddy. But we were dying.
That's oh gosh, that's a good one. I don't know what I would have done. And it's funny that you said that, because I distinctly remember the moment when I saw the tour, and it's got to be intentional, how gorgeous it was when she does take the bonnet off of her, when they start to fight. You see, Fantine, that long hair. And to me, that was such a smart, way to already get your eye going, look here, because in a couple minutes it's going to be gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to go back to the energy thing, every time I've seen Phantom, it's funny because I know the show so well. I at times find that I watch other people's reactions if I'm near somebody that I can tell has never seen it. And when I saw it,
oh yeah, fun.
You, there was a school group that was like the first, I would maybe like 5 rows worth, and I started tearing up during the overture, because to see these kids watch this show for the first time transported me back to, I remember sitting there for that flash pot in the overture starting, and to watch their faces go, oh, we're going back in time. I have goosebumps right now just to see that it still does it every night.
I get it.
And to see them like cheer, when she kisses him at the end, in this idea of redemption, and like, they get it. They totally get it. So,
and it makes you realize how important it is for kids, how important it is for education. Because I work with Broadway Classroom and a few other groups. So it's like, you'll meet school groups before or after they see the show, and then they put it together with a real person, and you get to work on, group activities together, and they get to express and ask you questions. And so that's another level of cool when you're interacting with young people, and they're like, oh wow, not only am I learning, I'm seeing a show, I'm seeing what's possible in the arts, I get to meet an actual person that's doing it and make it seem tangible. Because that, as I said earlier, that's the thing I never threaded together, is that like, oh, that's what real people do, that's just somebody I see on TV. So I get a huge kick out of that, especially because it's like, it is one of those things, if a story is told well, if it's executed well and told well, it will clearly stand the test of time, as we've seen with so many things that we tell over and over and over again. And this is just like one of the most brilliantly directed shows, I think, in theater history. It's so thorough and thought through. There isn't a moment, there isn't like a finger that is put up that is not without a purpose. Everything's been so thoroughly thought through. So yeah, it is fun to see how, and that was the way with Les Mis too. Like 25 years later, here we're going to bring this show back, and it's like young people are getting excited about it. It isn't,
which is, such a testament to the message of the show also. And I remember just recently, so many cool things I never caught with Phantom. Like I never noticed that Madame Giry knows that backdrop's going to fall before and I was like, she pulled Christine out of the way, and she went to go kneel here, and she went, no, come over here. And just, something like that. Or I love the reversal, and I'd never thought of it, because sometimes your brain is just thinking more about the music, and how in Act 2, right before, the rehearsal for Don Juan, where the piano goes off, the fact that they're now coddling Christine with the chair, the exact same chair that Carlotta was coddled in. It's like, and it's interesting too. Just so many different things that you catch. And
oh yeah, that I still catch too after doing it for years.
What's something that you catch that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of before?
Well, that moment that you spoke about in playing Ray in the Broadway company, I have to kind of be lined up next to Lefebvre, and Lefebvre has a moment where he kind of hears something while Carlotta's starting to sing, and Giry catches that there's kind of like this chain reaction to them already being aware of the Phantom's presence, and we're watching Carlotta sing that "Think of Me" before the drop falls. But there are blocked moments where you see those two characters already aware of their presence, and I think the audience feels it, and you clearly caught it, and I had never noticed that exchange between them until like last year.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so
So
many things.
yeah.
Well, Phantom aside, I want to talk about your own creative talents. You're a writer. You've written this. It sounds incredible, Heathen Hill. Could you tell us a little bit uh, about Heathen Hill, where you got the premise? I mean, where and if there is not a more fitting time for this show from
Mm.
our political climate, and can you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I have always kind of tossed around ideas and scribbled things and written little things here and there and tried all different kinds of things. And it wasn't until the last election year, 4 years ago, and I was in DC at the time, and I was doing the first iteration of Secret Garden when we were at Shakespeare Theater Center. And while we were teching the show, I mean, I feel like I was in a shrub for our 10 out of 12s, blocking scenes. And the votes came in, and we realized how the election was going to go. And it was really devastating for a lot of Americans. And I was really, really hit hard. And I was so sad and depressed and in tears. And like, it was tough. And I started to question like what I was doing. I was looking at this beautiful show that I was doing, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not like, yes, theater helps people clearly, but I was thinking for myself, like, what am I doing? Um, and I really felt my creative spirit just really suffer. And it wasn't until shortly thereafter um, I realized I needed to get kind of fired up about my own voice, about my own creative spirit, and that's when I really started writing. And the first thing I wrote was just out of fear and honesty. The kind of like cross section of being angry enough and frightened enough and fed up enough made me kind of really crack through to what is, I think, the truth of what I am as a creative person. And the first thing that kind of came out was the story, and it just kind of flooded from me. And the premise of the play is it kind of starts off with a handful of men, different backgrounds, races, economic circumstances, and it appears as if they're all at like an artist retreat upstate. They all kind of like meet in a barn kind of space, and they're talking about the things that they've created, and it feels like they're kind of like living in the woods and relating to one another and sharing their stories. And as the play progresses, you realize that they're interred in kind of a post America concentration camp for homosexuals. And so then you start to see through a series of flashbacks how they all converged how they all kind of met in this spot, how their stories collided, and how they kind of survived, however they were able to survive through this difficult time, but through art. So it kind of was like, it essentially was the thing I needed to write to save myself through feeling artistically dead.
Mhm.
And so I wrote the thing, and it was the first thing I actually just completed. There were so many things I had started, and now I'm married and I have someone that I can tell my ideas to. And for years he would see them manifest. He's like, you had talked about that. And I was like, I just never jumped on it. And then when I was reading Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she has this whole beautiful story about how she met Anne Patchett, and they had this amazing connection. I don't know if you've ever heard this story, if we talked about this before. She has a whole story about how she met Anne Patchett and they became friends. At that time, Elizabeth Gilbert had the story about a divorcee who goes into the rainforest and blah, blah. She never finished it. She meets Anne Patchett. Years later, they meet again. She asks Anne Patchett what she's been working on. She's like, well, it's a story about a divorcee who goes into the rainforest, and that unfed spirit in Elizabeth Gilbert transferred to Anne Patchett for her to finish. And that story was so inspiring to me because I feel like I have seen so many untold stories in me realized, and it spoke to me, and it's like, just finish the thing. There are all these creative stories that are looking for hosts. She speaks to the idea of genius, and it's not a person, it's a spirit that comes through us. And you see these people strike magic with these amazing ideas, and so it was just motivation. It's what it was. And it's like, just finish the thing. So that was the kickoff of just feeling confident enough to see projects through to their completion. And it gave me so much joy and fulfillment that my work side, going to theater, could be my work, and my creative work would be what I do at home. And that has fed me for the past 4 years, really. So yeah, that's kind of what that history is
It's
about.
terrifying seeing projects through, like this project
Oh, yeah.
here, starting this show was something that, I'm married as well. And my spouse will say the same thing. He was like, you've talked about wanting to increase what you do as a medium, but I was starting to feel kind of like the burnout working on shows as a director. And I'm like, I felt like I was hitting a wall a little bit, and I loved both of them so much. And then when this pandemic hit, I was like, I've got to do something. Like I've got to utilize this creative part of my brain with the fact that I still love giving back and the educator part of me. And then I was invited to be a guest on a podcast as a medium. And I don't think it was until I was a guest on that podcast where I was like, oh, like I'm supposed to be doing this. And it's funny, when I always talk about this with clients, like with the fact that you are a writer, there is an X on your timeline, meaning no matter what, that's going to happen while we're here in the physical. That's something that you mapped out before you got here. And so, I feel very much like starting this up feels like I was supposed to do it. And it's funny, every time you try to back away from it, the universe will keep giving you signs of going, no, keep going, keep going. And like within 2 days, I mean, it was like somebody had contacted me about wanting to do the podcast right after. I was like, maybe this isn't a good idea. And then an office space pulled up. And then the table that I had always wanted to have as my office table that was normally like $2,000 on West Elm was marked down accidentally to $400. And I'm like, okay, if these aren't like weird signs from the universe though, that I'm supposed to be going, and and the final thought, I have a question for you. How do you channel? Because it's interesting. Like for me as a medium, when I have different energies coming through, I feel like the joy of what I get to do, and maybe it's because I have a background in theater, I want to acknowledge and I want to honor their personalities. Like I don't want to just say, well, I've got grandma here. And if grandma's a fiery person, like I want to make sure that shines through and I can honor that in the way I relay my messages. So there's times I'll say like, did grandma have like a really dirty mouth? And they'll say, oh yes. I'm like, oh great. Now I can say it this way. Like she wants me to. So when you wrote Heathen Hill, how did you what do you do as a creative to get inside the minds of so many nuanced different people? And how do you make sure that, oh gosh, this could go on for a whole day, but how do you go, okay, nope, I'm going to go on to this character now. How would they volley back? And like, how do you do that?
It's interesting because I think all actors are, we gravitate toward inhabiting these other stories and these other spirits. And when you're, I've had a handful of moments where I can truly say that I've handed myself over and some other spirit kind of took over in the storytelling. I feel like I had lost myself. And that's so hard to do. And that's why the greats are the greats, and that's and there's something so satisfying about that experience. So actors are already kind of keyed into kind of channeling other people anyway, where there's something really fascinating in that for us. And I appreciate that background for my writing, because we're always, I mean, like from little kids, you're coming up with different voices and characters and this and that. The characters that I write are so alive for me inside my head. I mean, I always feel like I'm a better actor in my head because like I've always played around as a quiet kid in my head, and I have all these like fantasies and ideas and create all these people. And so now as an adult, as a writer, I'm allowed to do that for work. And so, there'll be kind of like the skeleton of somebody I know, or somebody I've met, and the way they talk and the way they think. And, like there are people now in my life that I use as references, or, or people that have passed. My grandfather, I'll use a lot. And I reference them, or things they would say, or things I've heard in passing. And they do kind of come alive. And I kind of keep them all in here, and it takes a long time to kind of knock out a draft and then revise it. And it can be something that you have with you for years. And that's why they have to be so alive in your head, because they are really kind of like living and working with you for a long period of time. And now to me, they seem like real people that I used to know once,
Yeah.
So that's the fun thing. Like last fall, we had our first kind of big produced reading in New York. And it was fun to really capture some actors that got it.
Yeah.
I was like, you have been in my brain and you're manifested in front of me. And so that's very exciting. So I think being an actor helps leading into that writer life. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because like as far as what's going on in my head, it's like these people are real live people.
It's funny. I meant to tell you actually, and this came through earlier for you. I feel like clear as day, they said it during your creative process. Do you hear like a different version of your voice that will edit things for you at times?
Yeah.
Because they talked about it earlier, because your grandfather came through earlier and he was like, please make sure you bring it up. He says sometimes if you get that, but it's weird. Like you hear your own voice almost like speak it out loud, and they go, scrap that, put that there. And he had acknowledged that earlier.
Yeah.
Is this the one that I had talked about when I read you a couple of years ago? Something about his teeth. Do you remember? Remember he told me he was really excited to eat corn on the cob again.
Oh gosh, I can't. It's so funny when you were like, remember, and I was like, I wish I had held on to those notes. I couldn't remember. I know my first grandfather had all fake teeth, all dentures. Yeah. It was like in a glass by his bed when he'd go to bed.
That must
scare the crap out of me. Yeah.
Because whenever I get like, it's funny, they'll either pop them out of their mouth or like they'll look like see-through to me, which means not. That's my symbol.
Not real.
They'll show me gold, which just means either they had fillings or it's just, again, you never really know. Or if they show me corn on the cob, it's weird, but that's my symbol for I didn't have teeth and I missed it. So depending on how they show it to me, and I have so much respect for what you do, and just
thank you.
And for your writing. And I feel like I would be, remember the Golden Girls episode where Blanche tries to become a writer and like oh, you got to watch it. She's like, she has writer's block, but she hasn't started writing yet. And Dorothy's like, well, you can't call it writer's block. And she starts quoting Shakespeare and she thinks it's her own. And she's like, like, what is it? To sleep, perchance to dream. And it's hysterical. I'll find the title of it and send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
It's great. So a couple rapid fire questions for you before we go.
Oh, sure.
Okay. First one. Now I don't believe it works this way. However, and I know I mentioned it to you. There are definitely spirits that will pop in to the Majestic for sure, but it's weird. Like sometimes I'll get, family's here to cheer on so-and-so today. There are like hardcore fans on the other side that will come through to watch. And in particular, there's always one woman. She is, I would say she's like, even now I'm getting it, 54. She died of, I believe, ovarian cancer. And she's such a diehard of this show. She hangs out in the theater when there are new performers that go on. And she, I remember she told me that she had the album playing when she passed away. And she's so funny. Like every time there's a new pairing, she's like, oh, it's great. I don't have to pay anymore to see it, is what she says. And so that's one. But so while I don't believe they're stuck there, if you were stuck as a ghost in a theater and could only see one show, like you were stuck for all of eternity, what show would you pray that you were stuck in?
I would say the original Into the Woods company. I could watch infinitely.
Joanna Gleason every night.
Yes. Joanna Gleason for the rest of time.
For the rest of time. Yeah. That's a good one. couple of our guests have been saying Gypsy. Gypsy's like the heavy hitter right now. They said
Oh yeah.
good production, of Gypsy. They said.
Yeah. Well, it was the first thing because I had seen that PBS broadcast as a kid, and that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, that one's burned up here too. Like I guarantee you, can you think of what Bernadette Peters is doing when she goes, some of us don't like the way you've been telling it. Like I literally, she's looking at her nails. I remember she's pulling them out. I mean, and just like certain things will be branded up here. That's I would never get tired of that show. And Jack's mom, how iconic she is.
Yeah, iconic. Genius delivery from an entire company. It's like, come on.
Whole thing. Yeah. All right. So that's one. Second one, what did I have? Did you have a performer that you met at the door that came backstage that ever left you starstruck?
That came to like Phantom or the shows that I've been in, or
any show that you've been in that you're like, oh,
I would say Sarah Bareilles, because she's so great. I mean, I think when you're that talented, she just seems like it's like, she's so incredible, but she's also such a humble, lovely person. And she was backstage, and I remember just passing her, and I think I must have just like shown on my face that my jaw was to the floor, and she was so lovely. And then I tweeted about it, and she tweeted back, and I was like, she doesn't have to do that. Like, and then I saw her play at Madison Square Garden shortly thereafter, and it's like, she's killing. I mean, like, epic.
I remember when she was here in Buffalo, I met her, and she was, again, I was like, can I ask you a question? And you could tell that the security was trying to push everyone through, and she stopped them. And I was like, what kind of digital keyboard is that? The really cool one that looks like a baby grand. And she was like, I don't know offhand, but if you give me your handle, like I'll reply to you. And like, it just like, she didn't have to do that. Oh, what character that you played would benefit most from a medium?
Oh, Chris in Saigon.
I forgot about him.
He needs help.
Yeah, he does.
He needs to communicate. He needs to talk to Kim.
Good one. What's your favorite coffee place in New York? This is literally for my own benefit, so I can go check it out when pandemic's lifted. My own selfish.
It's so funny because now it's just like, I would suggest you come to my kitchen because I'll make you great coffee.
Perfect. I'll be there. Watch the Golden Girls episode where Blanche becomes a writer.
We'll get all caught up. Yeah.
Come snuggle with your dog.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being a guest today. You're so special. You're so incredibly talented. And
thank you.
Everyone at home, I will put his handle up on this video. So please go follow him, go check him out on YouTube, on any of his social media accounts, and go discover all the incredible things that is Jason Forbach. So again, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And I will see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.